What has happened to marriage in the 21st century? My subtitle, or the subtitle following the main title, What Has Happened to Marriage in the 21st Century, is an invitation to restore our humanity. When I speak about marriage, and I believe this will become clear by the end of the lecture, I will emphasize that God's arrangement for marriage is a brilliant project to restore humanity. And I will try to clarify this proposition. But initially, I will say that in the United States in 1960, when I speak about what has happened to marriage in the 21st century, in 1960, there was not a single couple in the entire United States living together without marriage. Now, more than 50% in American society live together as couples without marriage. And in some age groups, the rate reaches 59%. But the problem does not stop at the borders of Western societies. In Egypt, my beloved country, the divorce rate rose from 7% in the year 1960 to 40% last year. 40% of marriages we have. In Egypt, 240 divorce cases daily. You can imagine 240 divorce cases daily. We have 3 million divorcees. We have 9 million children being raised away from their parents due to divorce. The thing that breaks my heart is that this frightening rate in Egypt does not differentiate between Christian and non-Christian. So it is clear that this ailment, this epidemic, and it has managed to cross all barriers, not just moral and psychological ones, but religious ones as well. Religious doctrines have not stood firm against this epidemic, the epidemic of divorce. What is the most painful result due to divorce? There are results, numerous for the spouses due to divorce, but honestly, what worries me is the children. My primary concern is their psychological suffering. In one of the studies, I have the names, but unfortunately, the names of the American scientists who conducted the studies will not appear. And I also have the names of Egyptian scientists from many universities in Egypt. In medical schools, psychiatry in particular has been preoccupied recently with the impact of divorce on children. But among the most important negative effects that children suffer after parental separation are anxiety, and the rate of anxiety and depression among children is times higher than it was 30 years ago. Psychological conflicts, antisocial behaviors, aggressive behaviors, drug abuse, major difficulties in psychological and social adjustment, a lack of social skills. All of this has become very clear in our Egyptian society due to the high number of divorce cases. I believe the issue is not limited, as I mentioned, to Western societies and Egypt, but I believe it is spread to the rest of the Arab countries. I have not had the opportunity to look at marriage and divorce rates in Iraqi society in general, or in the Kurdistan region, but I believe we will find that the epidemic is spreading globally. And I encourage my loved ones here to conduct more studies in this field. The question I will pose is, what has happened to marriage in the 21st century? Certainly in a lecture like this with limited minutes, I cannot present all the reasons that led to this. From political, social, spiritual, moral, and cultural reasons. But I will truly limit my answer to one thing. And why this particular thing? Because I see hope for a cure, meaning if we identify a specific diagnosis, we can provide a treatment for it. I believe there remains hope to preserve homes that have not yet been struck by, if I may say, this harmful virus that I am presenting. My beloved, without exception, in the East and the West, across different cultures, we enter into marriage without answering the most important question: why do we get married? Why do we marry? When I sit with young people preparing for marriage and try to gauge their concerns regarding it, I find that the questions occupying them are likely: when will I marry? Who will I marry? How will I marry? The financial difficulties that delay marriage, the inability to find the right partner, and various societal pressures are what always occupy the youth. Questions like these, and from my point of view, my beloved, the most important question that should be answered by young people before taking the step toward marriage is a correct and sound answer to this question: why do we marry? I will present 5 reasons I have heard in my practical experience and in what I have. The first reason: I marry for stability. The second reason: I marry for happiness so that I may be happy. The third reason: I marry for love. The fourth: because I need sex. The fifth: because it is the way of life. These are the 5 reasons I have become accustomed to hearing constantly. And I believe that in a scientific study on those who have married or those preparing for marriage, I believe the answer to the question, why do you marry, will not go beyond these 5 answers. I am not sure if you agree with me or if there are other answers I am not aware of. Why do we get married? I want to settle down. I want to have fun. I want to be happy. In Egypt, we do not call marriage a wedding. We call it, does anyone know? A joy. They ask you, when is your joy? So marriage becomes associated in our minds with joy, with happiness or love or sex, or that it is the way of life. Why did I choose this question and try to engage with it and discuss it? Because from my point of view, and I hope this happens, those who have already married, regardless of their previous answer regarding this marriage, there exists an opportunity to correct the answer, even if decades. There is a chance to correct the answer. So if we married for the wrong reason, there is an offer to reorganize our marriage so that it is for my goal. What I will do is discuss each of these 5 reasons that drive people to marry, and I will show their inadequacy and weakness and I will show that none of these 5 reasons are suitable to be a solid, firm foundation upon which marriage is built. I will show this not from the Holy Bible, but I will show it through scientific, psychological, philosophical, and sometimes biological studies. The first reason I marry: for stability. I want to settle down. I am tired. I want to find psychological stability. Finally, I want to settle. And the truth is, I am surprised by this answer for a simple reason. If we return to Erickson's description of human psychological development, he describes the stages of human life as 8 stages. The most dangerous stage among them is the 5th stage, the stage of adolescence, from age 12 to age 20. Erickson has a wonderful description that is respected by all psychologists. in each of the 8 stages of human life, from 0 to a year and a half, from a year and a half to 3, from 3 to 6, from 6 to 12 to 20 to 40 to 60 to 80, in each of these 8 stages. There is a crisis in a person's life. And if one is able to overcome this crisis, they move to the next stage, capable of facing the following crisis. But if they do not resolve the crisis of the 3rd or 4th stage, they move on to the next stage, carrying the burden of an unresolved crisis back to Mari. Consequently, their ability to face the crisis of the stage they are living in is hindered. What is the crisis of the adolescence stage, after which young men and women will most likely marry? He calls it identity crisis. In it, the young person suffers severely from instability. But it is necessary, with the help of family, the church, and society, that the young person succeeds in overcoming this crisis by the end of the adolescence stage. When the are body for provided for the young man or woman, by the end of adolescence, they should have settled through the identity crisis. How do we know they have overcome the identity crisis? At the very least, they have explored the different alternatives, and they were able to answer the 2 most important questions in life: who am I, and what do I want to do in life? What is it that I really want to do in life? Who am I? What are my beliefs? What is my religion? What is my position in society? And what is it that I want to work as? I consider reaching this stage to be stability. When the identity crisis is resolved, the young person then begins to embark on the journey of marriage. In my point of view, marriage is an exit from stability in order to embark on a new journey with a new person they do not know anything about. Marriage is not for the sake of stability. In fact, I can say you should settle first in order to get married. It is extremely dangerous for a young man or woman to have crossed the identity crisis while still swaying, unstable, and answering the 2 most important questions: who am I and what do I want in life? And before settling, they move on to marriage. But if they are settled, I believe they can start the journey of marriage. Marriage is not for the sake of stability. Rather, I say marriage is for those who are settled. One should be settled first in order to marry. Secondly, I say that marriage is an end, and the word stability suggests the end of a journey, whereas in reality, marriage is the beginning of a journey. The third point, it has a somewhat philosophical dimension. Most philosophers of the last century, and most of our writers in the Arab world, and at the forefront of them, Naguib Mahfouz. Naguib Mahfouz's literature rose to global prominence, and Naguib won the Nobel Prize. Naguib Mahfouz, one of the most important reasons that made him win the Nobel Prize is his delving into that intense psychological suffering, the tragedy of human alienation. For man is an alienated being. Immanuel Kant, Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel, and others, Nietzsche and others, wrote about human alienation. For man is an alienated being. This alienation is rooted in the psyche of every human being, regardless of their race, religion, background, or age. My brothers, we have a deep longing inside to be home. I want to go. I want to be settled. We have an existential anxiety deep within us. It always makes us feel like strangers to something. Perhaps we cannot discern the features of this thing. We have no clear concept of the final resting place of the human soul. But we do have this feeling of being alienated. When will we finally settle down? Many philosophers have expressed this alienation. Many sociologists have as well, and many psychologists too. But I must not fail to mention how the prophet David expressed this alienation. Listen, my brothers, to what he says in Psalm 84, describing the state of the human soul in its alienation. How lovely are your dwellings, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, yes, even faints for the courts of the Lord. Then he says these words, the sparrow has found a nest, and the swallow a home. It is as if he envies the birds of the sky for finding a place where they feel safe and secure. But they feel they have found their home. But human beings do not find this. And man remains a stranger his whole life. My question, which I pose to myself and to all my listeners, and to scholars and philosophical thinkers, Juan Sara, what is your deep alienation rooted in every human being? I fear someone might say, I do not feel this alienation. I would tell you, if you do not feel these moments of alienation, then you have succeeded in taking a painkiller, a drug, or an intoxicant to make you forget the pain of loneliness and alienation. But the reality is that alienation is deep within the entity of every human. Perhaps one who excelled in portraying this alienation and offering a cue for it is Naguib Mahfouz. In the novel Time's Children of Geblack 4, when he revealed how we became alienated from the great ancestor, or in another novel called Time's the Road, which is alienation from the Father. But in truth, our Lord Jesus Christ, in a short story of no more than a few lines, summarize the human problem that he is alienated from his Father's house, and that the cure for his alienation is to return not just to his Father's house, but to his Father's embrace. In a parable, the prodigal son. Unfortunately, when moments of alienation deepen, and a person feels the cruelty of that distance, hear me, my beloved, in dead discipline in what I say, a person interprets this feeling wrongly by imagining that the cure is marriage. The cure is in marriage. And this reminds me of a story in philosophy. Socrates used to conduct wonder dialogues with his students. In one of the dialogues, he asked the question, what is love? And everyone offered their view. There was a man named Aristophanes who offered an interesting and amusing theory. He said, love is the search for the other half. And he told a myth to describe this. The myth says that when the gods first created humans, they created them as cylinders with 4 eyes, 4 hands, and 4 legs. He had 2 eyes in front and 2 in back, 2 ears in front and 2 ears in back. He had 4 hands and 4 legs. So humans were very powerful. And they made such a racket that the gods became angry with them. So they split them. They cleaved each one of them into 2 halves. Since that time, each half searches for its other half. This is a mythical legend that reveals deeply mistaken concept of marriage that still prevails to this day. He says, I'm looking for my better half. This is a myth. He realizes this is a myth after he gets married and discovers he is not the second half that makes him whole, but perhaps the second adversary he struggles with, unfortunately. But it also reveals a deep feeling, a human being missing something, alienated, searching for stability, searching for an end to this feeling. Marriage is a cure for alienation. It's a wrong interpretation. Marriage does not treat human alienation. And that's why I personally see in the psychological clinic that feelings of loneliness are sometimes deeper in married people than single ones, meaning loneliness is not marriage. One last thing to add, I say that marriage is not stability because it is a journey with a stranger. Bear with me in this proposition. This is not my own words, but the words of a scholar. This man is Stanley Howard Wallace, professor of ethics at Duke University. He says this terrifying phrase, and he is a philosopher, writer, and a great thinker. He says that we always marry the wrong person. No one be disturbed. Do not be afraid. And no one should take any decisions based on this talk. I will clarify what I mean. That we always marry the wrong person. Because we cannot know our life partner. And even if we assume that at the beginning we married the right person, just wait for a short while, and inevitably you will find that they have changed. In marriage, we are absolutely not the same people we were when we started. Herein lies the major problem. How do you continue to love and care for this stranger you found yourself married to? An idea. This man presents, I recall it aligns with an article I wrote over 30 years ago. I was writing a series of articles about marriage. I was telling young people who are looking to be certain that they chose the right partner. I was telling them that to reach the idea that you are certain you chose the right partner, you need to say three things. You need to say, I know myself very well. Very. And the fact that I know my partner very well. The hell. And the third thing, that I know the future very well. And in truth, I do not know myself, nor do I know my partner, nor do I know the future. So the idea of claiming that I found the other half is a myth. And the idea of imagining that I found the 100% right partner with whom I will spend the rest of my life is a false idea. You do not know yourself, nor do you know the depths of your partner. And even if you knew yourself in the depths of your partner, you are not who you were more 5 years ago, or even 5 years ago. So I have changed, and they have changed. So the idea of stability is a naive idea. Marriage is a lifelong journey with a stranger. There must be guarantees for the success of this journey. But I am arguing that it is not possible, while I am spending a journey with a person who is changing, while I am changing, to say that marriage is a state of stability. The second proposition I hear a lot, or what I imagine, is marriage for the sake of happiness. And in this too, my dear friends, the same man says these words, which is, he says that the most destructive thing for marriage is the pursuit of self-gratification, which assumes that marriage and family is an entity designed for self-gratification, and it is necessary so that we become happy through it. This pursuit, which is self-gratification, makes happiness the purpose of life. Listen to the following statement. It turns the life partner into means to achieve this end. It makes the life partner a means to reach this end. Why am I married? I want to be pleased. I want to be happy. So to live happily, what do? I get married, so the partner becomes just a means for my personal fulfillment. This disposition destroys marriage because it reduces the partner to a tool. I say that living for the self, using the partner to make oneself happy, is a deification of the self. This man is not a Christian theologian. He is writing science. He's writing philosophy, a professor of ethics, a professor of philosophy. But I also would like to draw attention to this lady, Emily Esmond Magnus Smith. She is a writer, very famous psychology professor. She has a bestseller in the New York Times, Washington Post, and most international magazines, which call it one of the most sold books in the world. But so by the word, she wrote a book titled The Power of Meaning. And its subtitle is the title before you. Unity, meaning in life, comes from things much deeper and more complex than just being happy. Emily Esfahani Smith is a student of the founder of a major branch in psychology today. It is positive psychology. His name is Martin Seligman. Martin Seligman founded this new science about 75 years ago. Sorry, in 95. He founded this new science, positive psychology, and this science was researching happiness. Today, we have an entire science called the science of happiness. I believe some of you know that some countries have created a ministry of happiness, like the UAE, for example, in the Arab world, because there is a science called the science of happiness. Yeah. The amazing thing is that studies in the science of happiness have confirmed that those who make happiness a goal in life be depressed. These are scientific studies. Whoever makes happiness their goal in life becomes depressed. Emily Esfahani is researching this issue. She asks, how come? Why does one who searches for happiness and makes it their life's goal get depressed? She said, because the truth is that it's clear that there is something more. What is this something more? Meaning, a person should search not to be happy, but for their life to have meaning. And I believe, my friends, that we agree on this. That you can find a person who is suffering, but there is meaning to his pain. You find him content and grateful. Like finding a father who toils hard and suffers to give his children the best opportunities in life, and when he sees them succeeding and flourishing, even though he still suffers, I cannot say he is comfortable or happy. He suffers every day, but he sees that his suffering has meaning. So he is satisfied and content. Meanwhile, studies confirm that people who lived for happiness and obtained what makes them happy always find that the saying we psychiatrists like to use applies to them, that the dream is better than the reality. Imagination is better than truth. And everything is lost upon possession. Everything is lost upon possession. They strive and strive, without mentioning names. One of the greatest businessmen in our world here in Egypt, after achieving impressive wealth, he is thinking these days about working as a DJ because he does not feel fulfillment. There is no fulfillment. The search for happiness may lead a person to depression. And let me say, from my experience, it may lead them to addiction. Addictions of forms, because they want that dose of dopamine that makes them happy. Who wrote this book? I hope there will be a chance to read it. Human beings are designed to live a meaningful life, not just a happy one. I emphasize this idea through a type of psychotherapy that I respect and sometimes use. It was developed and founded by Viktor Frankl. For those who don't know much about psychiatry, we have three great figures in the field. Freud is a great scholar, then Jung, and finally Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl said that the essence of man is not the pursuit of pleasure, as Freud taught, nor is it the search for power, as Alfred Adler taught, but rather it is the human search for meaning in life. He applied this theory based on his own terrifying test and experience, because Hitler put him in Nazi concentration camps for. He witnessed the death of his family while suffering the most extreme forms of pain in Nazi camps. Yet he found meaning for his existence in that camp, to encourage, comfort, and support the tortured souls around him. He emerged from the Nazi camps and authored a new form of psychotherapy. He called it logotherapy, or meaning-based therapy. To this day, this school is respected all over the world, where the doctor or therapist tries to help those who are suffering, not just to get out of their suffering, but to find meaning in the heart of that suffering. The meaning could be just personal development, for example, or helping others. Therefore, happiness cannot be an end goal. I remember writing this phrase after an article I was writing about happiness. You may agree with it, you may not agree, but this is what I propose. Happiness is a visitor that surprises us with its presence. It arrives suddenly and leaves suddenly. You cannot summon it, and you cannot retain it. Does anyone agree with me on this idea? I think the most beautiful thing about happiness is that it surprises us. Right? We didn't plan for it, but suddenly you find something that dazzles you, something that surprises you, and perhaps the element of surprise is what makes it delightful. Why not? But dear friends, we all know that mood swings and losing the feeling of happiness is extremely easy. Often, all circumstances are good, but we do not feel happy. We cannot summon it, and we cannot retain it. It surprises us with its visit, and it leaves when it wants. We have no control. But I also argue that those moments when I personally felt overwhelming happiness were linked to achieving certain purposes. I struggled and to accomplish something, and achieving the purpose leads to happiness. Consequently, happiness is an outcome. Happiness is a result and not a goal. Marriage cannot serve as the source and reason for happiness, at least. If you forget everything I've said in this case, I am using my life partner to make me happy. And this is a habit that destroys marriage. This beautiful woman, Dame Tara Parker, she is an author and a daily columnist for the New York Times. She says that throughout the ages, marriage was a social entity to achieve the common good. I'll clarify this at the end of the lecture. What does achieving the common good mean? But now it has become a private arrangement for individual satisfaction. It has changed the purpose from we to I, and she calls it me marriage. Me marriage. I sit with a young woman thinking about marriage. What do you want? What do you want? The guy you commit to should love me. He should make me happy. He should help me realize my potential. Discover all the potentials I have. Help me to be myself. He is for my sake. And the same goes for the young man. Oka, while researching this meta, says these dangerous words. Alice says, the idea that the happiest marriages are those that achieve individual fulfillment seems counterintuitive and against common sense. Shouldn't the importance of the relationship between partners in marriage come before individual fulfillment? Masamawi Bowman. Sadly, it is no longer like that. For many centuries, marriage was viewed as a social unit. Then, the emotional and intellectual needs of the spouses came second. And this was to maintain the continuity of the marriage. But in modern relationships, one looks for a partner who makes their life exciting and helps them achieve their personal goals. I believe this statement alone explains why we have 240 divorces every day in Egypt. It explains why Americans now live without getting married. The concept of marriage has changed from an entity for a continuous relationship to an entity for my own personal satisfaction. The third idea, or the third answer, is marriage for the sake of love. My generation heard so many songs about love, didn't it? Oh, you who said and promised, and you don't even know what love is. Oh, you who wronged love and said beware. What do you understand about love? Tell us now, what is love, please? What is love? You sang a lot to us about love, and you flew us into horizons, vast horizons of vague, drifting feelings about love, without anyone giving us a precise definition of what love is. What is it? Love. Wrote a long time ago, I am amazed at this word that humans use to express their relationship with God and their relationship with ice cream. The same word is used to express the relationship with God and the relationship with ice cream. The Epidemic. What is love? We keep singing about love. Most young people, why did you commit? We fell in love, but what is love? Unfortunately, there is no clear definition. I say that marriage needs romantic love. And in fact, it is the only healthy sphere to experience it at Shanghai. But it has been proven that it cannot be built upon. Marriage needs much more than just romantic love. Romantic love, enough. This man, his name is Ernest Becker, a multi-award winner, a great non-Christian author, says, please listen to these phrases. In the past, humans relied on marriage and family for love, support, and security. But regarding everything related to the meaning of life, identity, and hope for the future, they look to God and eternity, or the afterlife. But modern culture has questioned these truths and even declared their death. There had to be something to fill the void that God left behind. And they found nothing more readily available than the experience of sex and marriage. They looked to it to fill the void that God left regarding these deeper needs. The result is that the partner has the divine substitute for fulfilling life. Fulfilling all emotional and spiritual needs has become the responsibility of an individual we made into a God. Is this idea clear? He says that in ancient times, marriage had a place. It satisfied certain needs. But there were deeper human needs which God and spiritual matters used to satisfy. However, after we declared the death of God in Europe, we cast aside God and spiritual matters. What experience is left for us in this world? What could possibly fill this void in our perception? The experience of marriage, sex, and romance is capable of filling this void that God left after we pushed Him away. We have made it our God, and sure, the partner is overwhelmed. They cannot be God. But there is another famous psychologist named Erich Fromm. Listen to what he describes and how he describes romantic love. He says, if two strangers meet and suddenly the wall between them collapses, he goes, and they feel so close to the point of feeling as one. This moment is one of life's most powerful and exciting pleasures. And the excitement and pleasure are much stronger if the two people were suffering from loneliness, isolation, and lack of love before meeting. This miraculous experience of sudden intimacy happens more easily if accompanied by sexual attraction than practice. However, this type of love is by its nature extremely temporary. The two people will soon realize forcefully that their intimacy quickly loses its miraculous character, and then their personality differences, frustrations, and boredom take over to kill whatever excitement happened at the beginning. Of course, they do not realize this at first. Of course, in fact, they make a bigger mistake by taking the intensity of their infatuation and madness for each other as proof of the depth of love that brought them together, while it is actually definitive proof of the depth of loneliness they suffered before meeting. In reality, there is no other life experience or project that begins with such high hopes and expectations. Then it always collapses like love. This king is romantic love. Marriage for the sake of sex. And I think this is a prevailing thought, that I want a legitimate framework in which I practice and satisfy my sexual needs. I think the response to this, in short, I say that making sex the purpose of marriage dehumanizes the individual and objectifies the partner. If you say, I will marry for the sake of sex, then what drives me to make this decision is my biological instincts, my desire to reproduce. And this means, I want to say, a degradation of humanity. Humanity, but the other side, which is more dangerous, is objectifying the partner. Why marry? It is a means to satisfy my needs, so I objectify the partner, dehumanizing the individual and objectifying the partner. But finally, marriage, because it is the way of life. Right, how many agree with this idea? Why do we marry? It's the way of life, isn't it? Right. But be careful, my dear ones, that this idea of the way of life pushes me to ask a very important question. Who established this way? Is it a societal tradition or a biological one? A question I think that is very relevant. Who legislated this way? Society? If we say that, we are in a real catastrophe. Because what happened in Europe? They said, who says marriage is necessary? If we need sex, we can find sex. If we need love, we don't need marriage. I remember in the year 2004, I gave a lecture at a major conference in Cyprus about marriage. I quoted a French scientist who says, word for word, 50 years from now, the article was written in the late 90s. We will study in sociology that humanity in ancient times had a social system called marriage, but it will vanish. What? At the time, people told me this was a pessimistic and incorrect view, but I wish, my beloved, you could see what European society looks like now. Let me share one statistic. Studies say that for any civilization to continue throughout history, the birth rate must be at least 2.8. The birth rate for this civilization should be 2.8. All European countries, without exception, are below this rate, and some reach only 1. This means that these civilizations are on the path to extinction. Some smart people knew this fact and exploited it very well. They knew it was possible to occupy Europe through a very simple process that you don't procreate, because marriage has collapsed. Why did marriage collapse in Europe? Because they rebelled against societal norms. When they considered marriage a social arrangement, a social norm, they said, why should I conform and submit to the obsolete laws of society inherited from the past? Why don't we enjoy ourselves and live our individuality and live my personal freedoms away from these societal frameworks? But if you say it is not a societal norm, but a biological one, then the situation is even more dangerous. Richard Dawkins, the fiercest atheist in modern times in Oxford, a biology professor at Oxford, says we, as humans, are nothing but machines for the continuation of DNA. He wasted our humanity and ignored our spiritual existence. He saw us only as creatures that rely their instincts to mate, so that DNA continues to exist in the world. Well, I believe this is a demeaning of the human being, and it is extremely dangerous to say that marriage is the norm of life, a societal norm, or a biological one. So, the question is, why do we marry? I will conclude with a proposition. I believe I must reveal my identity here as a Christian who takes pride in my Christianity and in the fact that Christianity has my identity. So, why do we marry? I say that marriage is a divine order, not a societal norm. God ordained it for man before the fall. The order of marriage was in Genesis 2:2. And the fall of man was in Genesis 3. To fulfill God's will. This is my Christian perspective. Marriage is a divine order God ordained for man before the fall, to fulfill through it God's on earth. The wonderful text says, God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them and said to them, theologians say that verses 20 and 27 are a decree, the creation. Verse 28 is the decree of civilization. God was giving a decree to establish human civilization. And human civilization is based on marriage. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful. How did they be fruitful and multiply? Through marriage. And civilizations that rebelled against marriage paved the way for their extinction. For when they despised marriage and lived sexual freedom, they began to demolish their own civilization. The decree of civilization: be fruitful and multiply, not so that you may be happy. Romantic love will come. Romantic love has its place and has all the value. Not for the sake of happiness. Happiness will come as a result. Not for the sake of sex. Sex is a wonderful gift meant for marriage, but we do not marry for the sake of sex. But there are deeper dimensions to this. to establish a civilization on earth. To be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. How do we subdue it? Through creativity, innovation, and by forming and raising children with sound minds and well-adjusted personalities who can produce and introduce a new earth and subdue it, max. When it says a little later, have dominion over the fish of the sea. How can they have dominion over the fish of the sea without inventing ships? How can they have dominion over the fish of the sea without creativity and innovation? Have dominion, subdue it, and over the birds of the air and every animal that moves on earth. This is a foundational text for marriage. The second text is in chapter 2 of Genesis. The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. I will return to this text and its beautiful meaning in a few moments. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. God did not create man to be a lazy, idle person, but to work. This was before the fall, to tend the earth and create within it. Finally, the text we heard from Emad at the beginning of the meeting. The Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." Not I will make him, but I will use or please him, but I will make him a helper for a great task, meant to establish civilization on the earth. The purpose of marriage is far beyond the purpose of the individual and beyond the purpose of the two getting married. The purpose is higher than this: to multiply, be fruitful, and rejoice in establishing production, fruitfulness, and civilization on earth. Marriage is higher than just our narrow personal goals. It is a transcendent purpose, higher than and beyond our small personal aims. What has happened to marriage in the 21st century? We have brought marriage down from its lofty, high purposes to our own narrow, small aims. We have restricted it to satisfying ourselves, deepening our individualism, and feeding our narcissism. So we have come to marry for our own sake. As the thinker Professor Maher Samuel mentioned, marriage for the sake of myself. God did not institute marriage merely for a test. Look at the text, my beloved. I will make him a helper comparable to him. I always say when I read this text, I must ask two questions. A helper for what? A helper for whom? A helper for the man. For what? A helper for what? For the purpose. So marriage is for the sake of the purpose. And what is the purpose? To fulfill God's will on earth by cultivating it, and to create civilization within it, and to accomplish good works. In Ephesians 2 it says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." God has a sublime purpose for our existence on earth. And God saw that man alone could never achieve this purpose. So he said, "I will make him a helper comparable to him." I place before you this drawing that perhaps summarizes my take on the issue of marriage. Why do we marry? I mentioned at the beginning, it is a call to restore humanity. The circle in the middle represents the human being. And the human is a project that develops and becomes complete. They are not born complete. Do you agree with me on this? Humanity emerges, develops, and matures. The human is a dynamic being. They are not born from their mother's womb as something already complete. But man emerges, develops, changes, and renews himself. He blossoms, bears fruit, and flourishes. That before this man to become the man of God's design, if you return to the texts I read, he needs 3 relationships, and I see them as the 3 corners of this The first is the relationship with God. The second is the relationship with a partner, with the other. Then the relationship with nature, with the world, with the... In the heart of this triangle, man develops. Without the relationship with God and the relationship with a partner, listen to me, my beloved, in a committed relationship, and without work, struggle, and striving in life, man does not develop. His humanity. Humanity needs three fundamental relationships. Bhakti. Our triune, the Holy Trinity, ordained that man be a being who manifests and develops, or his humanity emerges in a continuous dynamic state through a relationship with God, a relationship with a partner, and a committed relationship, a covenantal relationship. That is why in Christianity we say marriage is not a contract, but a covenant. Then the relationship with nature, where we innovate and create. Without these three relationships, man does not exist. The first relationship is the relationship with God. Remember the previous text I read just moments ago. It says, the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. This is a literary rhetorical expression. God does not have lungs to blow with. When he breathed, he did not breathe into the man's mouth as if he were dead to give him the kiss of life. Rather, the beautiful scripture says he breathed into his nostrils. We breathe through our noses. It is as if it wants to say that for man to be human, he needs to breathe God. He needs to be in an intimate relationship with God, breathing God. I believe this is a new definition of the word prayer. For prayer is not merely repeating words, but a deep sense of need for God, relying on him and breathing him in a living relationship. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness, so that I may become like God. For my dignity, glory, and value, as a human, I need to breathe God. But the second thing is an intimate relationship with a partner. Do you remember my 30th wedding anniversary 3 years ago? I took my wife for a little outing, and then she asked me a slightly embarrassing question. She said, Maher, we have been married for 30 years now, and I have been a witness to your success journey. God has made you successful in many fields. I want you to be honest with me and tell me how much I contributed to your success. How much have I contributed to creating your successes? I thought for a moment to answer honestly. I said to her, this question is wrong. The question, it is not correct. You did not contribute to creating my successes. You contributed to creating me. Without you, it would have been impossible for me to be me. And I am not giving her a nice compliment on our wedding anniversary. But when I truly review my life, this friction between one thought and another, this mistake toward her, which required an apology from me afterward, this forgiveness for her when I made a mistake and she forgave me. This struggle in life was not, listen to me, my beloved, just situations to be resolved. And thank God they were resolved for the best. They were formative situations for my being. Through the repetition of all these situations, I was formed and formed and formed. From a young man of 20 says, hold on the day I got married, with mistakes, ignorance, impulses, and passions. We make mistakes and apologize. We think and disagree, and we agree. And what keeps us together is the covenant. That we made a vow to continue the journey together, in health and in sickness, in hardship and in ease, in poverty and in wealth. Our journey wasn't all love, not at all. We often went to sleep while in a state of sadness, but we would reconcile and learn from our mistakes. And as the days passed, I became me. Me. I told her, without you, it would have been impossible to be this father to these children, and to be this doctor to these patients, and to be this servant to those I serve. If I imagined hypothetically that you weren't in my life, it would have been impossible to be me. I don't mean I would have been a bad person or unhappy, but I wouldn't be me. I became who I am because of this covenant relationship with my wife. The head of the triangle, or the third angle, is the struggle with life. Work the garden, keep it, fill the earth. Struggle with knowledge, struggle with nature, innovate and create. And through this, you develop. These three angles shape a human being. One of them, and I believe the most important, is marriage. So why do we marry? To be a human being. This is God's order. Of course, there are some special callings for some men whom God calls to special service. That is different, but I am speaking in general. Marriage is a wonderful covenant relationship ordained by God for man, for his humanity, to be fulfilled, make a whole. When we live marriage this way, happiness is achieved. We experience stability to some extent. We enjoy romantic love. We often feel the pleasure and delight of sex. But these purposes are never the reason for which God ordained marriage. Marriage is deeper, transcendent to these simple and small things. I know this perspective might be new to us. We might not agree with it. I welcome all objections, all questions, if there are any clarifications, but primarily I thank you for your kindness.